Hello and welcome back. In today's session, we are going to be practicing sound meditation. In the previous videos, I mentioned that there are many options for establishing your anchor. You don't have to use the breath, and oftentimes it is not the best or most accessible for everyone. So, just like you learned to establish your anchor to the breath, you are going to do the same thing with sounds. So, when we have our eyes closed and we hear a familiar sound in our environment, like a dog barking, what happens is our brain turns this experience into something conceptual. So, we hear a dog barking and we think dog because that's what we have been trained or conditioned to know. When we hear a dog barking, it's likely coming from a dog. So, if we dissect this experience, we start to understand how our mind creates reality. So, whether you think in words or pictures or a combination of both, your mind creates the idea or image of a dog, even if you cannot see it. So, again, this happens because of our mental conditioning. We learned through experience that, of course, when we hear a dog barking, it's a high probability that it's coming from a dog. So we think dog. And we may even think of what kind of dog it is. So if we hear a high pitched yappy kind of bark, then we assume it's a small dog. If we hear a very low woof, then we might assume it's a big dog. So when we think dog, what is really happening? So when we hear a sound or when something makes a sound, it is generating sound waves. These sound waves move through the air, they enter our ear, and they hit our eardrum. The eardrum vibrates, then it sends these vibrations to the cochlea, which is filled with fluid. The fluid then ripples and moves and bends these little hairs that opens channels and creating these electrical signals. Those signals travel along the auditory nerve into the brain. And then our brain interprets the sound based on previous hearing experiences. So if you've never heard or seen a dog and you hear a dog barking, you would have no idea what it was. Then your brain would try to find some explanation or source of this sound. It might even imagine something really scary like a monster and then give rise to the emotion of fear. So, this is how our mental conditioning can actually create what we think of as reality. When we are working with sound, you will first recognize that the brain is conceptualizing because that's what it's always done. And this is not a problem. This is what you've been doing your whole life. You're good at this. So you don't necessarily need to change this pattern of thinking, but rather becoming aware of the fact that your mind is doing it. Eventually, you will start noticing this as a very interesting process. So that's how sound works. Why do we use sound as an anchor? As I mentioned before, the breath is not necessarily the best anchor for everyone. For others, they might be attached to peace and silence during meditation practice, and then they become agitated when there's noise and construction outside the window. And then they abandon their practice altogether for the day because they are worried that they're not going to be able to practice or they are going to be too annoyed. So, annoying sounds can actually become the object on which we rest our attention. A little personal story I'm going to share. Years ago, I could not stand the sound of a crying baby or a whiny child. And at the time, I was traveling often overseas. I was on airplanes for up to 12 hours at a time, probably a half a dozen times per year. And of course, there's a lot of screaming babies and toddlers on these kinds of flights. I would usually wear earplugs and then cover my ears with noise canceling headphones. But I had left my headphones on my first shorter flight. And I had a really tight layover and I could not go back to the other airplane to get my headphones. I also didn't have time to go buy some. So I got onto my long haul flight and there was nothing to save me from this annoyance that was arising in my body. And my seat, of course, was in front of a mother who had a baby on her lap and a 3-year-old child. So I started imagining the worst and I got really frustrated. Nothing had even happened yet. Then, as we started taking off, cabin pressure increased, we ascended into the sky, and these children started becoming frustrated, probably in pain because of the pressure. And I really, at this time, wasn't using sound as my anchor very often, but I needed to use it that time because working with my breath was not happening very well for me because I was so frustrated and annoyed. So, as I allowed this to happen, then the sounds actually started to become interesting, and I eventually recognized that this baby was not going to cry for 12 whole hours, and I was able to settle in and find some peace. So, I share this because if a sound is disturbing your peace, you can find freedom from this frustration and annoyance by using that very sound as your anchor. So each time you hear that sound, it is a reminder to bring your awareness back to the present moment. This is like that trigger that, oh, yeah. And when your mind begins to wander or get lost in thought, then the next sound brings you back to the present moment. You can use sound as the reminder that you are meditating to bring your awareness back again and again. In fact, you can even work as kind of a combination of sounds. The sound might be your reminder to bring your awareness back to your breath. You can also listen to the sound just in the same way that you worked with your breath by noticing the beginning, middle, and end of each sound. You can also notice the space between the sounds. This is often better for me personally, so this is just a matter of preference. Eventually, these sounds become very interesting as you notice what your mind is doing when it hears the sound. So if you are lost in thought and the sound appears, then you notice what happened to the thought. Did it disappear? Don't expend too much effort searching for the thought because that leads to more thinking. Just notice, and then you can bring your awareness back to the breath, or you can wait for the other sound to happen. So, this is your short instruction before we practice. As we practice in this session, it's going to be a little bit different than the sound meditations. I'm still going to use the bell, but the bell is going to be your sound anchor. So I'm going to ring the bell intermittently throughout the course of this short practice. And every time you hear the bell, it is your reminder to either bring your awareness back to the breath, or it's your reminder to just listen to the way the sound expresses itself. I am not going to speak during this practice because I just want you to work with the sounds. And if you find that you're distracted the whole time and not really noticing the sounds, then you may want to replay this and try it again. So go ahead and find your seat, making yourself comfortable, either in the chair or on a cushion. Together, we're going to bring awareness to the breath for just a couple of breaths, as we have in the other practice sessions. Feeling the lower lungs, the backs of the ribs and center of the chest, up into the collarbones. Take a big, deep, intentional breath. Exhale either through the nose or with a little bit of a sigh. Doing this for 3 or 4 breaths. If there are any obvious areas of tension or tightness in your body, bring awareness to those and send some loving energy from your breath towards that space and see if you can soften. If that's not possible, then just bring your awareness back to the breath or to the sound of my voice. Now, as you settle into your seat, you're noticing the weight of your body resting in space. And we will begin. Now, in the final minute of this session, please take a moment to thank yourself, expressing gratitude for practicing today, collecting all of that gratitude in your heart center, all of the merit that you have accumulated from offering this incredibly generous use of your time and attention to learning how to work with sound as you meditate. Caring for yourself with a deep sense of love, even if you don't always feel self love. This is an incredible act of that. So collecting all of this gratitude and merit in your heart center and envisioning generating it outwards from your heart center to benefit the beings everywhere. Offering some words, if you like. May you be happy and free from suffering. May you have peace and know the causes of peace. May you be joyful and compassionate. Thank you again for practicing. You may open your eyes. Give yourself a little stretch if you need. And have a wonderful day. Thank you.